Alrighty. So, I finally hit my mini goal for this season. I'm 3,600 currently. I still have a lot to work on. You can probably see Everbloom, Rise, and Throne provide the most difficulty, especially when getting into groups. Warrior actually provides a lot of value for Throne through Spell Reflects on multiple bosses, but it seems really hard to get into that key for some reason. So, I'm going to keep working on that. Um, but what I wanted to talk today about is this, which is compositions that are actually pretty good in Mythic Plus for Warrior, and probably why you're not really going to see these very often. Um, these classes here are essentially the only classes, Monk, Rogue, Druid, and Hunter, that provide value to the Warrior, and the Warrior provides value to them. One of the most difficult things about Warrior is the fact that its buff that it gives to the party in a composition is pure attack power, which is pretty much useless for most healers, useless for most ranged in the game. It does provide some value if you look at like Death Knights, Enhancement Shaman, Rep Pally. It does provide damage bonus to them, but if they have like a vengeance with them as well, that means you can actually have a uh they primarily do all these classes do primarily magic damage, actually, not physical. So they actually get a little bit less than what Fury really provides. So that's why I have these classes listed here. Only other problem here really being that Beastmaster or just Hunter in general is the only way to really get Lust. But honestly, you don't really need Lust in a lot of situations. I think people overvalue it significantly. Um, but what really unlocks this composition, you see, I have a couple different things here as potentials. Um, I have Vengeance and Prot here because they're pretty good. Brewmaster I have in there because it's the physical damage debuff. But realistically, while these comps are decent and hypothetical, the Guardian Druid is what really provides value to Warrior and what really actually sets up to unlock and really make a decent composition. And one of the reasons why you're not really going to see this comp and Warrior specifically do crazy, crazy well um, is simply because there's not really many Guardian Druids playing at a higher level, at a decent level. I've seen some like 34, 3,500 ones, seen a couple. Squish Vegan that I know of is probably the most notable in terms of Guardian Druids. But the Vengeance Demon Hunter can work as well. I think this comp is also kind of interesting with the fairy. I haven't played with the Feral Druid either, so I don't really know how they work or what they add. But I think this comp could actually be pretty good as well. Even if you need all melee potentially, if you don't need a range kick, like you can put a rogue in there and that also still be pretty good. Um, but basically, it's really hard to make a composition where your class provides value to everything and then they provide value to you. In terms of raid compositions, right? Because you can only have 5 people in a composition. This over here that I have pre-set up, this is the meta right now. This is what I would consider the meta comp currently. And it's because Vengeance values provide values to everybody. Mark of the Wild provides value to everybody. Augmentation provides value to everybody. The only person that Fire does not provide value to is the tank through Intellect, which is pretty much fine, provides value to everybody else, and then the health value to everybody. This composition, also because you're running Augmentation and Priest, provides a significant amount of bonus health to this comp, which allows them to live a lot of higher end mechanics as well. So your composition is really, really important. Also, your amount of crowd control and AoE stops is pretty important too. One of the problems Warrior really has is it only has basically an AoE stun. Our only AoE that is not a stun is Intimidating Shout, and for some reason it's capped at 5 targets. I don't know why. So Intimidating Shout is capped at 5 targets. The one thing that isn't capped is technically we would have a knockback that could knock back everything, but it requires a 2-point talent investment into something that's already terrible. And we just don't have the talent point economy for that. So that's also fun. But when you look at stops and why, while this composition I think is good, I think it also requires a lot higher execution to make sure everything is kicked and pulled together and done right compared to something like the meta composition, right? Because like you have this AoE stun, AoE stun, single target stun, single target stun, single target stun. It does have AoE stops with blind, which shouldn't DR each other, and has in-cap roar. But the stuns will DR themselves to the point where when you try to stun something, it doesn't stun them. So you actually can't stop what you're trying to stop, which I think in Mythic Plus and PvE content, they need to remove. Not necessarily that stuns last less, but they need to remove complete immunity from CCs because I think it really hinders some classes more than others. Obviously, Warrior, all we really have is stuns right now. So I think it really hinders Warrior here. Warrior's Battle Shout being only attack power, I think is also very, very bad. I think it should be changed to damage, so it could just percent damage. It's boring, but attack power is also boring. So it at least provides value to everybody else that you're playing with. And I think Warriors should get Lust. Honestly, it's always made no sense to me that Warrior doesn't really have Lust, because think about every big major fantasy movie you've watched, right? Think about like Lord of the Rings, the Riders of Rohan going into Helm's Deep, right? Like they're all going in there. He's rallying the troops, Stag! Right? Like he's fucking like, how is motivating shout being a lust from Warrior not a thing? And it would finally provide one of the worst tanks in the game currently, Warrior, with more value to the party, bringing a lust from the tank position. That would be sick. How does Warrior not have this? It's actually blowing my mind, and has been blowing my mind, that Warrior legitimately doesn't have lust when it's, throughout media and fiction, one of the most thematic things literally ever for the class. It just doesn't make sense to me. Because if they don't care about balance and what they care about is thematics, then fuck, dude, that's thematic as shit, right? But going back to, I guess, the issues of Warrior compositions, realistically, is the amount of CCs that they do against each other. Honestly, the more I look at this like Feral Druid comp, I'm very curious on how well this would do, but nobody plays Feral Druid. It's hard to find Guardians enough as is. And because I've only been pushing Mythic Plus for one season, I don't have friends to test this kind of shit with. But anyway, I didn't want to make the video too long, but it's essentially, I think that these are definitely potential comps that you can look at to try and play Warrior. And the thing that's kind of holding it back, I guess, really, is lack of Guardian Druids, and essentially the Warrior's own lack of group utility, which we know. I don't want to get into it because you've seen videos, you've seen all that crap, right? You know what it is. I know what it is. I don't need to make a 10-minute video. I don't want to make a 10-minute video going, oh, well, Warrior doesn't have Dispel or Soothe or Lust or doesn't have this, it's AoE stops, blah. I don't want to do that because everybody else is doing it. It's been done. I don't need to do that. I want to provide value to you making something that's more interesting than that. So here we are. But when I want to talk about comps and when I want to think about the theoretical level or limit of Warrior, honestly, it is pretty comp dependent, but I think you're going to be able to do within at least one key level of the highest timed key in the world on Warrior. So it's fine. It's just certainly lacking. And one of the things that I think goes into it as well is public perception, right? Public perception on Prot Warrior. Prot Warrior is honestly it's bad. Like I don't know, man. I tried to play with the Prot Warrior. I tried. I was on my Demon Hunter ult. Like, okay, let's play with the Prot Warrior, see how he does. It was rough. It was bad. That class is like no control. Maybe they were just bad. I don't know. But man, it was terrible. Warrior as a class kind of needs God. But something that I think is interesting is the sentiment currently, especially when you watch videos or Reddit or that kind of thing, is that Warrior is down bad, that it needs help, that it's really problematic in many ways. And I think that's a good thing, because that kind of sentiment isn't something that might not change overnight, or some changes might not occur overnight. But I think it is something that as we go forward through the seasons and the War Within, that we're certainly going to see a benefit from the sentiment of, wow, like, man, Warrior just, it's fucking, it's rough, man. Um, so I think that sentiment is actually a good thing. And developers and community managers, if they have any left, ugh, man, that whole thing is fucked up. But they'll know, and I hope they do something to improve the class and improve its playability with other classes. Because I think right now it's just a bit too niche in what it provides, and it also doesn't do enough damage in itself in its own niche. Right, Warrior is probably one of the few 5-cap classes in the game, and it has no funnel, and it provides very little value to others in itself. So I look forward to the class improving. But I think I've lost the plot, and the video needs to end because I don't really know what else to talk about. I just kind of wanted to present these thoughts and ideas I had on these Mythic Plus compositions and the difficulty of getting them together. But I think there is a decent amount of potential in them, even right now. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.